You felt it, didn't you? Yesterday something shifted. No message came, no call, no sign, yet deep inside your chest, there was movement. Almost like someone somewhere tried to erase you from their heart and failed. Carl Jung once said that the deepest connections are never controlled by logic, because the unconscious mind remembers what the ego desperately tries to forget. And right now someone is fighting a silent battle because of you. They told themselves, enough. I must move on. They tried to sleep without thinking of you. They tried to distract their mind. They forced laughter around friends. They even convinced themselves that you no longer mattered. But yesterday, something inside them cracked, because forgetting you was never just a decision. It was a psychological war between memory and soul. Most people believe forgetting happens gradually, but Jung understood something terrifying. Emotional bonds live in the unconscious, not in conscious choice. When two people share authentic emotional depth, they create what Jung called a psychic imprint. And psychic imprints do not disappear simply because someone decides to move forward. They remain, waiting beneath awareness. That person didn't wake up yesterday planning to miss you again. In fact, they woke up determined to finally be free from your memory. They promised themselves this would be the day they stopped checking your profile, stopped replaying conversations, stopped wondering if you still cared. They told themselves you were just a chapter that had ended. But then something small happened. Maybe they heard a song you once loved. Maybe they passed a place connected to you. Maybe silence entered the room at the wrong moment. And suddenly, the emotional wall they built collapsed. Because what they were trying to forget wasn't just you. It was who they became when they were with you. Jung believed love activates hidden parts of the psyche. When someone truly connects with another person, they encounter their own anima or animus, the inner emotional mirror of the soul. You were not just a person in their life. You became a reflection of their deepest emotional self. And when they tried to forget you yesterday, they unknowingly tried to erase a part of themselves. That is why something broke. The mind can reject a person, but the psyche refuses to abandon meaning. They may act strong outwardly. They may appear distant or unaffected, but internally, their unconscious mind reopened memories they thought were buried. They remembered how safe they felt talking to you. They remembered moments they never admitted mattered. They remembered the version of themselves that existed only in your presence. And this realization frightened them, because forgetting you means accepting emotional emptiness. Jung called this confrontation with loss a shadow awakening. When someone suppresses unresolved feelings, the shadow grows stronger. Yesterday, their shadow confronted them. It whispered truths they avoided. It reminded them that closure never actually happened, and for a brief moment, they felt emotionally exposed. Here is the part most people never understand. Missing someone is not always about wanting them back. Sometimes it is about recognizing unfinished emotional meaning. They may not reach out. They may not admit anything. But yesterday they felt your psychological presence again, not because of coincidence, but because emotional bonds operate beyond time and distance. The unconscious communicates through feeling, not logic. That is why you suddenly felt restless. Why memories returned without reason. Jung believed emotionally connected individuals remain linked through shared unconscious patterns. When one person struggles internally, the other often senses it without knowing why. And yesterday, they struggled. They tried to convince themselves you were replaceable. They tried to believe life was easier without emotional vulnerability. But the psyche rebelled, because authenticity cannot be replaced by distraction. And now something dangerous is happening inside them. The more they try to suppress thoughts of you, the stronger those thoughts return. This is known as psychological rebound, the mind's resistance to emotional denial. The harder they try to forget, the deeper you embed in their unconscious. They are beginning to realize that forgetting you isn't relief. It feels like losing something meaningful forever. And that realization is where everything changes. Because once a person recognizes emotional loss consciously, the healing process transforms into longing. They may still remain silent, but silence does not mean absence of feeling. Sometimes silence means the emotion has become too deep for words. Yesterday was not just another day for them. It was the moment their illusion of detachment started breaking. And what happens next is something Carl Jung warned about carefully. Because when the unconscious refuses to let go, the psyche begins searching for resolution, and resolution always demands confrontation, either with the past or with the person they tried to forget. Yesterday was only the beginning, because once the unconscious mind reopens a forgotten emotional connection, it does not quietly return to sleep. Carl Jung explained that suppressed emotions behave like unfinished stories. They seek completion. They demand acknowledgement, and the person who tried to forget you is now entering a psychological phase. They did not expect the return of emotional truth. At first, they will resist it. They will tell themselves the feeling was temporary, just nostalgia, just loneliness, just a random memory. They will attempt to rationalize everything because the ego hates vulnerability. The ego wants control. It wants certainty. It wants emotional independence, but the unconscious does not negotiate with logic. Throughout the day, subtle reminders will continue appearing. Your name crossing their mind without warning, a memory resurfacing while they are busy, a sudden emotional heaviness when night arrives. Jung described this as psychic recurrence, when an unresolved emotional bond begins pushing itself back into awareness. And here is what makes this moment powerful. They are no longer simply remembering you, they are beginning to feel you again. There is a difference between memory and emotional activation. Memory belongs to the past. Emotional activation belongs to the present. Yesterday, the memory returned. Today, the emotion awakens. And emotions are far more dangerous than memories. Because emotions force honesty. They force confrontation with choices that cannot be undone. Somewhere inside them, a quiet realization is forming. Maybe losing you was not as easy as they pretended. Maybe walking away did not actually bring peace. Maybe distance did not erase connection. Jung believed that when a person encounters someone who mirrors their deeper psyche, separation creates an inner imbalance. The psyche begins searching for restoration. Not necessarily reunion, but meaning. And meaning is what they are struggling with now. They may scroll through old conversations secretly. They may revisit places connected to you. They may wonder how you are doing, even if pride prevents them from asking. This is not weakness. This is the psyche attempting to reintegrate a lost emotional experience, but something else is happening beneath the surface. They are confronting their shadow, the part of themselves that avoided emotional responsibility. The words left unsaid. The feelings never expressed. The moments when fear replaced honesty. Jung warned that ignoring emotional truth eventually leads to inner conflict. And inner conflict always produces restlessness. That restlessness is growing inside them right now. They might feel distracted around others. Conversations feel empty. New connections lack depth. Even happiness feels incomplete, because comparison has begun silently, and comparison is the unconscious mind's way of measuring emotional significance. They are realizing that what they shared with you was rare, not perfect, not easy, but psychologically meaningful. Here is the paradox Jung identified. People often understand the value of connection only after distance removes it. While you were present, familiarity reduced awareness, but absence sharpens perception. Without you, they see clearly what once felt ordinary, and clarity can be painful, especially when it arrives too late. At night, when distractions disappear, the psyche becomes louder. They may replay conversations, wondering what could have been different. They may imagine alternative outcomes. They may even feel sudden regret, not necessarily about losing you, but about not fully understanding you when they had the chance. This is the stage where emotional denial weakens. their logical defenses begin collapsing, because emotions that survive separation prove something powerful. The connection was never superficial, and now they face an uncomfortable truth. Forgetting you requires emotional numbness, but remembering you requires vulnerability, and vulnerability terrifies the ego. So they stand between two psychological forces. One part of them wants freedom from emotional attachment. Another part longs for emotional authenticity. Jung called this tension the process of individuation, the struggle between who we pretend to be and who we truly are. And you, unknowingly, became part of their individuation journey. That is why forgetting you feels impossible. Because you are linked to their personal growth, their emotional awakening, their self-understanding. Yesterday something broke inside them because they realized moving on does not mean emotional resolution. It only means emotional avoidance, and avoidance cannot last forever. The psyche always returns to unfinished feelings. Soon, they may begin questioning decisions they once felt certain about. They may wonder if pride created distance, if fear disguised itself as strength, if silence became a mistake. But here is the crucial point, Jung emphasized. When emotional awareness rises, the individual reaches a crossroads. They either suppress the feeling again, or they move toward integration. Integration means accepting the emotional truth they tried to escape, and once that process begins, their behavior toward you, or toward the memory of you, will inevitably change, because the unconscious has already spoken. And when the unconscious speaks loudly enough, the soul listens. Now we arrive at the moment Carl Jung considered the most transformative, the moment when emotional realization becomes impossible to ignore, because once someone understands that forgetting you has failed, their inner world begins reorganizing itself around one question. Asterisk, why does this person still matter to me? This question is dangerous, not because it brings pain, but because it brings truth. The person who tried to forget you is no longer fighting memories alone. They are confronting meaning. Jung believed human beings do not suffer most from loss itself, but from the absence of meaning behind loss. And suddenly, your absence carries meaning they cannot dismiss. They may start noticing patterns. How certain songs still remind them of conversations with you. How certain jokes feel incomplete without your presence. How emotional moments automatically make them think of sharing them with you. These experiences reveal something profound. You became part of their psychological landscape. You are not just remembered. You are integrated into how they experience life. And this realization creates emotional pressure, because integration changes identity. When someone deeply connects with another person, the psyche reorganizes around that bond. Removing the person does not restore the old self. It creates a gap where transformation once existed. Yesterday, when something inside them broke, it was the illusion that life could simply return to how it was before you. Jung described this as the collapse of the ego narrative. The story they told themselves, "I'm fine without them," no longer feels convincing. And when the ego loses certainty, the unconscious steps forward. They begin reflecting differently, not just about you, but about themselves. They may ask questions they avoided before. Why did this connection feel different? Why does distance not bring peace? Why do new experiences feel emotionally quieter? These questions signal awakening. Emotional awakening does not always lead to action immediately. Sometimes it leads to silent transformation first. They may become more introspective, more aware of their emotional patterns, more honest about their fears. Jung called this confrontation with the inner self the beginning of individuation, the journey toward psychological wholeness. And here is the hidden truth. You were a catalyst in that journey. You triggered emotional depth they may never have explored otherwise. That is why forgetting you feels like abandoning personal growth, because you represent a moment when they felt emotionally alive. And people rarely forget what awakened them. But awakening also brings discomfort. With awareness comes regret. Not necessarily regret about separation itself, but regret about emotional blindness. They may realize they misunderstood your silence, misread your intentions, failed to appreciate emotional vulnerability when it was offered. These realizations arrive quietly, often late at night, when distractions fade and honesty becomes unavoidable. Jung believed that unresolved emotional connections often return symbolically before they return physically. You may appear in their dreams. Random thoughts about you arise during moments of stillness. Their mind revisits shared experiences, searching for emotional closure. This is not coincidence. It is the psyche attempting reconciliation with unfinished feeling. And now something unexpected happens. Instead of trying to forget you, they may begin protecting the memory of you. The resistance softens. The struggle changes direction. They stop fighting the feeling and start understanding it. Acceptance replaces denial, and acceptance opens the possibility of transformation. Whether they reach out or remain silent is not the most important part. The true change happens internally. They can no longer pretend the connection meant nothing. You become part of their emotional truth, and emotional truth reshapes future behavior. They may treat others differently, become more emotionally aware, less guarded, more honest about what they value, because the experience of almost losing something meaningful teaches the psyche what truly matters. Jung often said that meaningful relationships act as mirrors, reflecting hidden aspects of the self. You reflected something essential within them, perhaps vulnerability, authenticity, emotional depth, or the courage to feel deeply. That reflection cannot be erased, even if time passes, even if distance remains, even if life moves forward externally. And here is the quiet ending Jung would point toward. Sometimes the purpose of a connection is not permanent presence, but permanent transformation. You may never know the exact moment they realized your importance. You may never hear the thoughts they wrestled with yesterday, but inside them, something changed. The attempt to forget you failed because the connection carried psychological meaning beyond circumstance. They learned that some people are not simply experiences. They are turning points. And you became one of those turning points in their life. So if you felt an unexplained emotional pull, if yesterday felt heavier without reason, if memories returned unexpectedly, understand this. Somewhere, someone faced the truth that your absence could not erase your impact. Because the deepest connections do not end when contact stops. They live quietly within the unconscious, shaping choices, emotions, and growth long after separation. And sometimes, the person who tried hardest to forget you becomes the one who understands you the most, only after realizing that forgetting you meant losing a part of themselves they were never meant to abandon.